All right, so now officially welcome, happy Wine Wednesday, 6:08 p.m. in Miami, and we are ready to start this webinar series. So the idea for the webinar series was really to compare and contrast very similar styles of the same grape to see if, terroir affects the style of a wine. And we'll be going to a very geeky stuff, so I'll have to warn you and advise you, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be great. So each webinar will have more or less an hour of duration. So tonight it might be just a little longer because we have to do some definitions in here before we start. And then we'll be tasting two wines at the very end. Tonight, two Chardonnays, okay? So this will be recorded and I'll be doing webinars every 2 weeks. So if you missed the first one, check us on the second one, which is 2 weeks from now, all right? So let me start by sharing the screen in here. And yes, now you can see the presentation. And let me just check so I can see the chat box, so I can keep an eye on it too. Okay, I cannot move this screen. All right, okay, perfect. All right, so yes, welcome to Terroir Matters. Let's see if it really matters, and let's see what is terroir. So for those of you seeing me for the first time, hi there, welcome. My name is Alessandra Esteves. So I began my career as a lawyer, later wine writer, because, you have to compensate somehow. And I took all the WSET courses and finished my diploma in wine and spirits, the level 4, back in 2016. And I am a Bordeaux tutor. I have a Champagne master level. I have the French wine scholar, certified specialist of wine. I am a master of Rioja as well. And for Florida Wine Academy, I am the co-founder together with my husband, Guilherme de Macedo, and director of wine education. I'm also a master of wine candidate. So there are about 400 masters of wine in the world. And I'm currently doing the stage 2. And I will sit an exam in July. So that is why this class also helps me understand a little bit more about grapes and regions and subregions, okay? So yes, welcome, very happy to have you guys here. If you are new to Florida Wine Academy as well, so first of all, Florida Wine Academy was founded back in 2016, and we teach a variety of courses, classes, in person, via webinar in downtown Miami, in Palmetto Bay. And also we have 305 Wines, which is a kind of a boutique wine shop. And this boutique wine shop with a very good selection of wines and Japanese sakes. So thank you all for, buying the wine packs as well for this webinars. Two very cool things that we do is Vino Summit, so a wine conference in Miami, and we are planning to have one this year, closer to, end of spring, beginning of summer. So I'll let you guys know soon. And then we organize every year Miami Champagne Week. So that is every October, and it is such a fun week, I promise you guys. And I know some of you, if, not a lot of you have seen it. Okay, so before we start, so for this session 1, we will compare a Chablis versus a New World Chardonnay. So the idea for this class is to first give some definitions, and then we are going to talk about the grape, Chardonnay, its origins, climate, regions, subregions. And then just give me 1 second, guy, because I'm seeing you raising hands, but somehow I cannot access the chat. Okay, now, all right, so sometimes, yeah, can you all see, hear me, everything? It's okay, because I'm seeing some people raising hands. I don't know if it is by mistake or anything, but just let me know. I have now the chat. Yeah, I see Roy raising his hand. So yes, if you need anything, type on the chat box. It is easier for me to read, okay? All right, so back to it. So we will see Chablis. We'll discuss soil, the style of the wine, the quality of its wines. And then we'll go to Chile and see the Aconcagua subregion and also the style and quality for those wines, okay? And finally, at the end of the presentation today, we will taste by comparing and contrasting these two styles, all right? Okay, perfect. So let's get ready for it. And so definitions. So the first definition that we have to do in here is the definition of terroir, okay? So probably some of you have heard this before. Probably some of you have never heard this before. So I'm going to put a poll in here, and I'll launch this poll, and you have a few, I'll give you a minute to choose. So basically I'm asking, what is terroir? And you can, just have a single choice. So option A, a combination of soil, climate, topography that define a style of wine. Option B, a combination of soil, climate, topography, viticulture, and winemaking. So now I'm adding the work done by people in here. And option 3, or C, it's much more than that. So terroir is much more than that. So go ahead and vote. So, I can share the poll, and also we can discuss a little bit about these definitions, because some people do define terroir by being a combination of only natural things. And some people do add viticulture and winemaking, and some people think about something else, okay? All right, so I see most of you, 83% voting. Okay, so this is a democracy, exercise your voting rights. All right, so 90, okay, 100% participants. That was amazing. All right, so let me share with you guys what you said. Okay, so all right, share results. Okay, can you see the results? So 56% says it is a combination of soil, climate, and topography. That's it. Only 6% included viticulture and winemaking. And then 39% said it is much more than that, okay? So it's, funny thing is that I do not have an answer for you, because I do believe that viticulture and winemaking do change terroir. So I am together with the 6%, but most of the people do define about only soil, climate, and topography. So making the 56% also, correct. So there is not one single definition in this case, okay? So yes, good job. Yes, but let's see what terroir really is, okay? So back to the presentation. So let me close the polls in here. Okay. So the more correct definition of terroir is really the natural environment of a vineyard. Okay, so yes, soil, yes, topography, and when I say topography, I'm mentioning elevation, slope, aspect, all of that. And then the climate is not only the climate of the region, it is the macroclimate, the mesoclimate, the microclimate. So all of that, okay? So for some people, yes, viticulture and winemaking too, because if the winemaker or the vineyard, somebody managing the vineyard is there making changes, that will affect the terroir, correct? But this discussion about terroir, it's kind of something philosophical and was always something that people used to discuss between old world and new world. So, every time people will say, okay, yes, Chardonnay from California. Oh no, that does not have any terroir, because our terroir in the old world is so much better. So people use the word terroir in this sense. My wine is better than yours because it comes from a great terroir. But that is really not true, right? Because even, good places can make bad wine in bad hands. So if you do not take care of your soil, topography, sometimes the vintages, right? The weather can play a part. So it is not only where you are that makes for a great wine. You need something more, right? Okay, so terroir is still this, discussion, but usually people use it as something special. So yes, can you smell the terroir of this wine? So yes, these wines come from a terroir. When, what they want to do is that this wine comes from a good place, okay? All right, but I also included 3 other topics in here for the definitions. So first is typicity or typicality. They say that the really English term, the correct English terms should be typicality, and typicity it is kind of an anglicism from the French, because in the French, they say typicité, so typicity in English. But I'll be using typicity because it is what we use most. So typicity means that a wine being typical is that it is typical of its kind. So when I say that a Chardonnay from California, it's typically rich, oaky, buttery. Okay, that is the typicity of the wine, right? It is the style. Can also come because of geographical provenance, right? So in the case of Chablis, wines are very fresh and mineral with a high acidity. So that's the typicity. And, until very recently, typicity was one of the top things. And yes, I want my wine to be typical. So if I am in California, yes, my Chardonnay has to be very rich and tropical and oaky and all of that. But, the world has changed, right? So nowadays, people are looking more into authenticity. And this is the, definition number 3 in here that we have to do. So, and I'm not mentioning authenticity in the case if it is real or if it is fake, okay? Not like that. Goes beyond that. So is this wine really authentic of its place? And for that, I'm going to use Merriam-Webster's dictionary that define authenticity as true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. So is this wine true to itself? Then it is an authentic wine, okay? So can you see the difference between, typicity and authenticity? Because typicity was something that was used also a lot in Europe, especially for the AOC laws, the DOCG laws from Italy, for instance, right? But it doesn't guarantee that the wine is good. It doesn't guarantee that it is really an authentic wine, okay? So, sometimes it is just kind of a cookie cutter, right? Typicity, whereas authenticity, yes, they will do the best that they can for that special year, with the weather that they have, with the conditions that they have. So it is not a cookie cutter wine. It is really authentic of place, okay? So Okay, talk to me, guys, because I'm not seeing any movement on the chat. So any ideas about typicity, authenticity? So thinking about all of that, what I think that more important than typicity, it is really authenticity. Is the wine true to the place? Okay. And of course, that encompasses the question of terroir, right? So yes, soil, absolutely, topography, absolutely, climate, viticulture, and winemaking, but is the wine true to itself? Okay, so now we are talking about, the authenticity of the wine coming from the terroir, okay? All right, and then as fourth in here, I put when place transcends grape, okay? So think about that. When you're drinking Burgundy, are you drinking Chardonnay or are you drinking Burgundy? And this is something that I heard from Nick Jackson. He's a master of wine. And, when he said that example, I said, oh, he's right? Some places, the wine character is so strong that you kind of almost forget what is the grape. If you think about Sancerre is another one, right? You have to double think and say, okay, Sancerre, is made from Sauvignon Blanc. So some places are more important than the grape, okay? Yes, Karen says Chinon. Absolutely. What is the grape of Chinon? You know the style. It is that fruity, refreshing, herbal, medium tannins. So the style. And then you have to think, oh, it is Cabernet Franc. Okay. So yes. Mark is saying in here that to express authenticity, you do not need prerequisites, no pesticides, no herbicides, and using natural yeast. Well, now we are talking, when we are going in the natural winemaking or, in more organic and biodynamic. So because a wine has used pesticides, isn't it authentic? So it is a discussion, Mark, that we have to, do a whole webinar series on this, but a very interesting topic, and I agree with you. And Carolina is saying that authenticity refers to a true representation of place rather than typicality, which would maybe suggest more style of winemaking. Absolutely, Carolina, you got it right. Okay, so typicality or typicity, it is something that you expect, but it is not always true representation of the place, right? And if you ever took a wine course, probably you heard about some things that can be done in a winery, additions, right? To make the wine taste different, okay? So yes, absolutely, okay? All right, so with those definitions, and again, I'll send the presentation to you guys so you can have it later. But with those definitions, I think we are ready to go into the presentation. So, and I wanted to discuss first this climate classification, okay? So bear with me because this is still very wine geek. Later, we'll go into regions and grapes. And these two doctors, Emerine and Winkler, in 1944, they defined 5 regions of California using a temperature index. So they created this for California, but it is applicable to other areas in the world as well. So basically what they said is that region 1 is so cold that the only grape varieties that will do well in those regions are Pinot Noir, Riesling, Chardonnay, and so on. Whereas region 5 is so hot that the only grapes that will thrive in that region, or the best grapes for that regions are Primitivo, Nero d'Avola, Palomino, Fiano, okay? And as wine regions, for instance, in region 1, we are talking about Chablis, very cool climate, right? Tasmania, Champagne, Marlborough in New Zealand, Friuli in Italy. And then as region 5, we are talking about Sicily, Jerez in Spain, the Greek islands, Sardinia, southern Italy. So very hot regions. And this is important to us. And, this degree days or GDD, growing degree days, they measure the heat accumulation over the growing season, okay? And based on that, you classify a region by its climate. So I wanted to put this in here quickly to first explain that, yes, wine or vines can grow in cool regions and in hot regions as well, but not every grape will do well, right? So if you put Pinot Noir, for instance, in a region 5, it'll be jammy, it will lose its freshness, its delicacy. So, it'll be jammy and a not very interesting wine. On the other hand, if you put Primitivo, which is Zinfandel, in a region 1, you ended up with green grapes. You cannot reach the level of ripeness, those grapes will not ripen. But very interestingly, the 2 wines that we are tasting tonight both come from region 1. So one is Chablis, and the other one, Aconcagua in Chile, is also classified as region 1. So now we are having the same grapes, right? We are having the same region in the Amyrine and Winkler classification. So, so that adds to the discussion about terroir that we'll see later, all right? Okay, so let's move on. And first, Chardonnay, right? So that is the first grape that we will see for this webinar series. Chardonnay is a very hardy grape. That means I can grow Chardonnay in multiple zones, climates. It's a good grape, doesn't complain about anything. You can have in a cool climate, in a hot climate. Chardonnay is it's a great grape. And also it can be made in very different styles. So we can have sparkling champagne, right? Dry, light-bodied, just like Chablis. Dry, full body, like California, Napa Chardonnay. And sweet, botrytized wines. In fact, they do it in Austria, some sweet Chardonnay. So, there you go. It is an easy grape, right? You can grow anywhere, made in different styles, and, still good. The aromatics are very broad, okay? And we'll see that in the next slide. So from green fruits to tropical fruits. And then we do use these winemaking techniques with Chardonnay. So oak, malolactic fermentation, and lees aging. And I'm also going to talk about that, okay? So overall, a grape that, easy to grow, can be growing anywhere, multiple styles, so very easy, okay? So let's take a look at the aromas. So Chardonnay, in a cool climate, you will have aromas of green apples and then lemon, lime, okay? In a more moderate climate, you can have more stone fruit like peaches, apricots. You can have, some mango as well. And then in a hot climate, think about, Central Valley, California, you will have more banana type of aromas, figs, a lot of tropical fruits, okay? So again, it is the same grape. What is changing is the climate. And because of that, you will have different aromas and flavors, okay? And let's see how oak impacts Chardonnay. So Chardonnay can be both fermented and aged in oak barrels. And of course, oak will give aromas and flavors. So think about the vanilla you find in wine, the sweet spices like cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. So all of this, toast and smoke, it is brought because of the oak aging, okay? And then brings texture as well. So oak has some tannins, and we'll talk a little bit more about tannins when we have a red wine. But, you know, it is kind of that drying, astringent sensation that you have. So oak does bring some texture as well. Oak, you know, make wines age-worthiness or age-worthy because it adds some structure, some body, so, you know, and more complexity, making wines better for aging. Adds complexity as well. And when we talk about complexity, it is simply, you know, adding aroma, flavor, and interest to the wine. It is just like cooking, right? If you're doing something and it's plain, you don't have any flavor, but the more you put into it, the more, you know, salt and pepper and spices and herbs, suddenly you have a very complex dish. It is the same with wine. So the oak fermentation and aging adds that complexity, okay? And pardon me, it is also a part of style, right? So in the case of California Chardonnay, every time that I mention California Chardonnay to you, you think about oak in that wine because it is part of the style you expect from it, okay? All right, so then let's go into malolactic fermentation. And that might be a new term for some of you, and, you know, or you might have heard before. So let me break it down. So after the alcoholic fermentation is finished, so alcoholic fermentation is the, you know, simple fermentation, sugar consumed by the yeast that will generate the alcohol, okay? So after that, what you have is a malolactic fermentation. And that is a conversion of the malic acid, which is super tart, into the more softer lactic acid. Benefits of doing malolactic fermentation in a wine. First, it decreases acidity. So if you're talking about a region 1 cool climate, it might be useful, okay? Also adds texture, adds aromas and flavors, you know, butter, cream, cheese. So all these aromas that you find in wine, they do not come from the oak. They do come because of the malolactic fermentation, okay? By adding more aromas and flavors, again, you're adding complexity. Also stability to the wines. Most red wines go through malolactic fermentation because of stability, okay? And you can do total malolactic fermentation, 100% in your wine, or partial, you know, just a little bit of malolactic, just one tank, and then you blend it back. And you can do inside stainless steel tanks or oak barrels, okay? So malolactic fermentation will be used by the winemaker if he wants to achieve, if they want to achieve the, you know, more texture, more complexity, decrease the acidity a little bit, they will use this too. And the reason that we are seeing this for this glass is because it is very much used with Chardonnay, okay? The example of Napa Valley Chardonnay, full malolactic fermentation. So that is why you have this popcorn butter, creamy type of aroma, okay? It is coming from that. Now, the other thing that we use with Chardonnay is lees aging, okay? So that is a third step, okay? We saw oak, we saw malolactic, and now let's see lees aging. So in here in the picture, you can see this is a barrel and we have the wine inside, and then you have some yeast in here. So the lees aging, you age the wine together with this dead yeast cells, okay? So the yeast has completed its job, has died, but you leave the very fine lees, you leave it with the wine because it will give you a very creamy texture. Brings complexity again, aromas and flavors. Now we are talking about brioche, bread dough, yeast. You know, it is also, it's like a bakery. Think about champagne. Champagne is aged sur lie, with the lees, right? So if you're doing that with a wine, it is adding a lot of complexity. So before I talk about batonnage and reductive winemaking, let me answer some questions here on the chat. So John is asking if there are different bacteria used to do malolactic fermentation. Yes, absolutely. So first of all, you can use just natural bacteria present in the wine, or you can use selected bacteria as well that you buy and use. And, sometimes the bacteria can give off aromas as well. So that is why you might want to select the type of bacteria. But most of the times, that is Pediococcus, Enococcus doing the job, okay? And then I had a question from Sharon and Carr in here saying, the Dodo wines are like that. All kind of mixes grape, but distinctly of place. Absolutely. So this is one of the regions that, yes, the place is more important than the grapes, right? Very good. Okay, so back to the lees aging, right? So, I use the oak to give the vanilla aromas. I use the malolactic fermentation to give the butter aromas. Now I'm putting the aromas of brioche, bread dough, yeast in here, okay? And if I do batonnage, that is a French term that means lees stirring. So basically, you put a paddle kind of inside the barrel and stir the lees to create even more flavors, even more complexity. And wines that are aged with the lees are said to be part of a reductive winemaking. So, kind of protects the wines from oxidation, okay? So Rowan is asking, the yeasts come dry? Yes, they all come dry, and then you just have to mix into, a preparation with water or a little bit of wine, and then blend into the tank. Yes. All right, so we talked about all of this as we wanted to give more complexity and more flavors, right? So now we are talking about terroir, and this webinar series is Terroir Matters, and we are talking about all these winemaking that is not part of terroir for most of you, right? 56% said that viticulture and winemaking were not part of the terroir, and here we are discussing it. Why? Well, these are very important things that they do with Chardonnay. So if they are using oak, lees aging, and malolactic fermentation, how can we possibly identify these wines in a blind tasting, right? Because you're adding all of this on top of it. So, but yeah, you can, because there is some other interesting things about it. So let me go ahead to this next slide, and we will talk about Chablis, okay? So Chablis will be our wine number one for tonight. We'll taste the wines in a few minutes, but I wanted to introduce the region to you. So first of all, northern part of Burgundy, very cold continental climate, okay? In Chablis, they use 100% Chardonnay, and they have some very, very special soils in here. These soils, one is called Kimmeridgian marl, and the other one is Portlandian marl. Marl is a clay limestone mix with fossilized oyster shells. Kimmeridgian soils are said to be, very good soils for Chardonnay, and they bring minerality to the wine, okay? So when you're talking to winemakers in Chablis, they will say that the tiny fossilized oyster shells in the vineyard will translate into your glass, and there you go. That is how you can smell the terroir in your glass. So yes, if you have been to Chablis, you probably, if you walk the vineyards, you see the oyster shells in there. It's pretty amazing and it's pretty impressive. especially if you're going to the Grand Crus or the Premier Crus, you see it in the vineyard. But science, until now, has said that there is no relation between, having oyster shells in the soil and then having oyster shells aromas in your wine. They say there's no direct relationship. It is not that the vines through its roots absorbs the fossilized oyster shells and then that will show up in your wine. It is not what science says, okay? So maybe we are smelling it, but it's not what science said. Okay, so let's go on. Rain in Chablis, 650 to 700 millimeters of rain. It's a lot, okay? So a lot more than Chile, as we'll see in a second. And the Winkler's climate region, this is region 1. It is, very, very cold, okay? In Chablis, we have 4 levels of quality, beginning from Petit Chablis, which is, the least special one, should I say. Then we have Chablis, Chablis Premier Cru, and Chablis Grand Cru, which is the absolute best that the region produces. We have around 5,000 hectares in Chablis, so just over 13,000 acres. There is a lot of frost risk. So, there is a lot of vintage variation too in Chablis. And to mitigate frost, they use heaters in the vineyard, which is extremely expensive. They have, chaufferettes, which are kind of, so they burn things to be able to warm up the vines. And they use sprinkler systems as well, okay, against frost. But even with those, some years are very bad for Chablis. And then, talk about the style in here. So the style is really austere, okay? Chablis has a steely acidity, so the acidity is very, very high. It has this flintiness, this gunpowder type of smell. And we all describe Chablis as mineral-like, okay? So yes, people say Chablis is one of the wines that you can, see the terroir and smell the terroir in the glass, okay? And in here, just a quick map from Chablis. So this is, Chablis, the region. You have a river running through the region. All the vineyards that you see in kind of dark yellow, these are Chablis. Petit Chablis are the vineyards, kind of in the outskirts of the region. Quality can vary a little bit. And then you have Chablis Premier Cru, which is the second best, very good quality, in both sides of the river, with different expositions, different topographies, different soils. And then for Chablis Grand Cru, it is just one slope, okay? So this is Chablis Grand Cru divided into 7 plots or 7 climats. And this is one slope overlooking south, as you can see from the map, just one side of the river. So, that is the best vineyard, okay? So if you had to apply the concept of terroir to Chablis, just seeing the map, the concept is clear in the Grand Crus, right? One slope, south-facing, overlooking the river, vines are on some kind of elevation or slope. Now, to define the terroir and typicity of a Petit Chablis is not as easy, right? Because then you have, north, south, different sides of the river, different elevations, different slopes. So it is not that easy, okay? So Ray, before we move on to Chile, Ray is asking if I am of the school of thought that clay, limestone, marl transfer to the wine, or do you believe that it does not? So it's a very interesting comment, Ray, and for that we need another webinar with 2 bottles of wine. because I do believe that, yes, you smell something, but until now, science said, there was no relationship. So I'm a person who believes in science. So I will go that there are other factors involved in it. So I think, it is a little bit more than that. Yes, I was reading recently an article about the saltiness that you feel in some wines, right? Especially Albarino from Rias Baixas. Is this really, the salt coming from the sea and transferring to your wine glass? So some people said yes, some people said no. Scientists cannot prove it. So yes, we know that limestone, chalk, marl, they definitely, have different pH levels, and therefore, grapes will behave differently in the soils. But that it can be transferred to the glass as a direct connection, no, I don't think. I think it is, it has, more than that, okay? All right, so moving on to Aconcagua in Chile. So now we are talking about northwest of Chile. In the inland, the valley is very warm, is a dry area, okay? And therefore you have some powerful red wines, you can have Syrah. But in the Aconcagua Costa, it is a coastal area, you have this cool climate. So 100% Chardonnay, okay? Soils now are totally different than Chablis. It is alluvial soils, they have this schist type of soils. So a lot more stones rather than, the clay limestone type of soils. Only 350 milliliters of rain per year. So if you compare that, remember Chablis had 700, right? So it is the double the rain. Winkler's climate classification, it's region 1. So this is cool, okay? So we are comparing two Chardonnays from very cool regions. Only 232 hectares, so the region is much, much smaller. And now the style is different. It is fruity, it has a fresh acidity, it is sometimes rich, can be oaked, okay? So remember we said austere for Chablis, steely acidity. Now we have fruity, fresh. So very different style coming from same climate, okay? One thing that I have to point out is that there is a lot of cloud covering in Europe. So Chablis has a lot more cloud covering than Chile, and which is a lot more sunny. So let me show you where it is on the map. I know the map is small, but I couldn't find a better map from Wines of Chile. So the Aconcagua Valley, it is this orange here on the map. And the Costa, where this wine is coming from, is really close to the coast. So you have all this influence from the Pacific Ocean, okay? And remember that the Pacific Ocean is a very cool ocean. In Chile, they have a Humboldt current. So it makes for, very, very cool climate. I remember being in Valparaiso in here, and, it wasn't winter. It was, I think it was September, October. So that means it was spring, but it was so, so cold because of these breezes coming from the ocean, okay? Kind of like, think San Francisco during, springtime, that in the evening you have to wear a jacket because of the Pacific influence, okay? So cool climate for the Chardonnay, all right? So now it is, finally time for us to start comparing and contrasting these two styles. And I wanted to, if you're tasting the wines, that's okay. If you haven't tasted, wait a few more minutes, because I wanted to give you the technical sheets of these two wines, so we can see, if they're really so different or so similar. So first of all, The first wine that we'll taste is Domaine La Roche Chablis Saint-Martin 2019. 100% Chardonnay, we're in Chablis, right? 12.5% ABV. Fermentation in stainless steel vats, okay? They want a clean wine, no oak aromas. But then the aging is in steel tanks, and they have some foudres, which are, you know, the big oak barrels. 15% is aged in this old oak barrels. So there is some oak in the Chablis, okay? Now, full malolactic fermentation. And I know probably you took a wine course before that, or, you know, you tasted a wine or listened to a class and people told you that Chablis was, you know, fresh and had no malolactic fermentation, but Chablis needs the malolactic fermentation, not to create the buttery aromas, because they don't need it. They need to decrease the acidity. Remember, this is climate 1 classification. It is very, very cool climate. So you don't want to have the tart green apple acidity. You want to have the more creamy acidity from the lactic acidity, okay? So full malolactic fermentation for this wine. And then lees aging for 10 months. So that means this wine has been in contact with the lees for 10 months to create kind of this more creamy on the palate, okay? In 2019, it's a warm vintage in Chablis. So let's see how this wine will taste. On the other hand, Arboleda Chardonnay Colchagua Costa 2018, 100% Chardonnay, 13.5% ABV. So, you know, not a big difference between those two. Fermentation in oak barrels. So now they wanted to have the, you know, rich and oxidation from the oak. And then aging in barrel for 11 months, okay? So the aging, it's kind of similar in both, but the Arboleda is doing in oak barrels, whereas the Chablis is doing in steel tanks and the large oak vats. Partial malolactic fermentation, they did not do full malo like the Chablis did. No information about lees aging on the technical sheet, but I suspect there is some, okay? And then 2018 is a cool vintage in Chile. So we are tasting Old World, Chablis, warm vintage, New World, Colchagua, cool vintage. So let's see how those will play, okay? So, okay, finally, it is time. Go ahead and pour your wines so we can, you know, taste them and discuss. So the Arboleda Chardonnay, which is under screw cap, and then the Domaine La Roche Chablis Saint-Martin, which I'm gonna corv in. And meanwhile, any questions, guys? Anything you wanna know before we start tasting those wines? Let me get my corv in. Oh, sorry. And yes, let me pour my wine. And I have a very interesting question in here, which I wanted to reply. All right, so Mark is asking a very interesting question. So he says, do you feel that the expression of terroir is a go in Chablis, where New World going is expression of winemaker? And I think this is brilliant, Mark, and I think you're right. But I think this is the perceived image. And that is why terroir has always been a selling point, right? So say, my wine is made in the vineyard, or my wine is made in the terroir. Okay, now stop a little bit. Look at the technical sheet. Yes, they are using foudre, so they are using oak, they are using malolactic fermentation, they are using lees. So the style needs the winemaking too, right? It doesn't make itself. And, you know, Chablis, like I said, it is always full malolactic because of the weather conditions. So, and because of the climate. So yes, it gives you the impression that it is done in a vineyard when we know, you know, there is a lot of winemaking on it as well, okay? Maybe not a very heavy hands, but definitely it is there. And I just have to say that, you know, I'm not being sponsored by any winery in this case. I choose two wines because of their climate and their, you know, the technical sheets. That is how I do. So nobody send me a sample of anything. I'm paying for my bottles as well. So that puts me in the condition of, you know, really saying what I think, okay? But I think that is the perceived reality, Mark, that yes, you know, one is a wine of terroir, the other one is a wine made by the winemaker. Not so much nowadays. Things have changed too, okay? All right, so go ahead and, you know, so first of all, I have the two wines here. And if you see, the Arboleda Chardonnay has a touch little less color, okay? So maybe my two glasses, let me try to put them. Yeah, it is just a touch little less color, but both are very pale, kind of pale lemon color. The Chablis has a little bit more color, okay? Even though it is a more recent vintage. Now, I want you to smell both wines, okay? And try to smell the aromas. Oh, they are very different. So now I would love to have some participation. If you're tasting the wines at home, I will obviously describe the wines. So let me stop sharing the presentation quickly so I can see you all better. So, you know, beginning with the Chablis. So how is the fruit? Are you smelling any tropical fruit? Or is this more green citrus fruit? So lemon, says Karen. Absolutely, right? It is like lemon, lime, even lime juice. So yeah, it is pure lemon on the nose. And Cheryl is saying, okay, Chablis to me is much more citrus and green apple. Absolutely. It is part of, you know, being a cool climate, right? These is the aromas and flavors that you get. So yes, no tropical fruits in this wine, okay? No stone fruits in this wine. But now, if they told us there is malolactic fermentation in this wine, I want you to, you know, go ahead, smell the wine again. And malolactic fermentation sometimes is the kind of buttery notes, but can be cream, or it can be kind of yogurt or fresh cheese. So go ahead, you know, swirl your wine, put your nose inside the glass if you have the wine, and try to think about fresh cheese. And that is the malolactic. Yeah, so Karen is saying just a little cream on the finish. Absolutely, okay? So it is really well made, right? Because it is not, you know, overt, or it is not too intense on the nose, but, you know, there is a touch of it, okay? Yeah. Okay, so, right. Carolina is saying there is a meringue quality, like a lemon tart pie. Yeah, perfect description, exactly. Because you have the lemon and then you have kind of this cream. I love that, okay? So Janelle is saying, yes, lemon cream pie. Okay, guys, you're making me hungry, okay? I haven't had any dinner yet, so yes, Julian is saying cottage cheese, exactly. So yes, so great. You got the malolactic in Chablis. Okay, so now you learned something. There is always malolactic. but it's not the buttery popcorn that you see with other examples of Chardonnay. Okay, so now I want you to smell this wine and try to smell the minerality of the wine, okay? So normally you find gunflint, gunpowder, think about that. Some other people describe it as oyster shells or crushed oyster shells. So let's find those minerals in this wine. So swirl, swirl again, you know, put your nose inside the glass and think if it is more gunpowder or if it is more like the crushed oyster shells. Yeah, so Solange is saying she does exactly smell oyster shells, and so do I. Yes, exactly. So Karen is saying, yeah, she needs half a dozen oysters to pair with this. Yes, I know, we're getting hungry. Now we are only talking about food and no more wine, right? So perfect, you see, so that is the description of Chablis, right? So it is green fruit, citrus fruit, a touch of cream because of the malolactic fermentation, and then oyster shells, confirmed by Carr and Cheryl. Yes. Okay, so very good. Now let's go directly to wine number 2. Okay, so don't taste it if you haven't. I know I'm salivating in here, but you know, let's just go with the aromas. Okay. So right on the nose, the aromas are very different. Okay, so what is the first thing that hits you in the Aconcagua, in the Arboleda Chardonnay? Oak, absolutely. So Carolina says oak. Yes, oak is the first thing. So now remember from the technical sheet that this winemaker fermented in oak as well. So even though the Chablis had 15% old oak for aging, in this case of the Arboleda, it was fermentation and aging in oak. So that creates much more oak than other wines, okay? Now, what about fruits? Do we have the same fruit profile of the Chablis? This is region 1, remember? Or do we have more stone fruits or tropical fruits? Can you smell mangoes in here or... Yeah, so Mariana says stone fruits, absolutely. This is peaches and apricots. Yeah. Yep, very good. Okay, peaches and apricots for Cher and Cara as well. Very good. Okay, so even though it is considered a region 1 by Winkler, you know, probably is more sunny, like I said, right? So this will translate into a little bit riper grapes. So therefore we have the peaches and the apricots, okay? All right, so we smell the oak, we smell the fruits. Now let's try to smell the malolactic. So swirl, swirl your wine again and think about butter, cream, yogurt, cheese, something like this. Let's see if we can find it in your glass. Yeah, so Cheryl says riper cheese than Chablis. Yeah, definitely. You know, in this case, I can say fresh butter. It is not, you know, movie theater popcorn butter. Absolutely not. But it is kind of like a fresh French butter, right? So it is in here. Okay, so yeah, you found the malolactic fermentation. Remember, for this wine, it's only partial, but it is here. Okay. So John is asking a very interesting question about, you know, how would some aging, if they would expand these wines, the difference between these wines or bring these wines more similar. I would say, you know, they will make these wines more different than what they are. So yes, aging will not do, you know, anything to bring these wines together. They are different. Okay. So Carolina is saying mascarpone. You see, you know, people are targeting, okay, let's make, you know, people hungry tonight. So mascarpone, mix of tanginess and creaminess. I like that. Okay. Yes, we all have to kind of, put the technical sheets better for winemakers, saying, yes, your wine smells like mascarpone. This is better to say than saying malolactic that the consumer will not understand. Yeah, okay, so different on the notes, all right? And what about minerality? Do you smell any oyster shells or wet stones or gunflint in this wine? So again, go ahead, swirl, put your nose inside and think, okay. Oh, I got the gunflint. So, right, Solange as well. Okay, so if you didn't get the gunflint, go ahead and swirl again. Think about gunflint, gunpowder, or really, when you fireworks, it is that smell that you have to find in this wine, okay? Okay, so Sharon Carl got the gunflint even before I said it. Okay, very good. All right, yeah. So you see both wines do have, some fruit, the malolactic, some oak, and both are somewhat mineral. Chablis more about the oyster shells. This one is more the gunflint, gunpowder. I will explain this for you later, okay? So go and taste the wine, taste the Chablis, see, how is the acidity? What do you think about the wine? What about the quality? Oh, how is the acidity? Yes. So I'm reading on the chat, high acid. Yes. But it's not just high, it is high tart acidity, right? Even though they did the malolactic, you can, the acidity is tart, right? It's not, a soft, round acidity. It's very tart. And Sharon is saying a tiny bit saline. Yes, absolutely. Okay. It is kind of salty at the finish. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So on the palate, bone dry like every Chablis, high tart acidity. The fruit profile is still the same. Very citrusy, limey, lemon. The wet stones are here, kind of the crushed oyster shells, kind of the austere style that we expect from Chablis. So full malo, 15% aged in oak, but this is a by the book Chablis. Is this wine typical, right? Talking back to our typicity discussion. This is a typical Chablis, is a by the book Chablis, okay? It is what people expect when you go to the restaurant. So I'm very happy with the choice in here because I think quality is, the wine is delicious, it's ready to drink. You can keep it for another, 3-5 years. This high acidity will allow the wine to develop. And I think it is just a great pairing with oysters, like we said, salads, and so on. So very good wine. Now, go ahead and taste the Arboleda Chardonnay to see if it is any different or similar. So also a dry wine, and the acidity is not as tart as, yes. Cheryl is saying it is a rounder mouthfeel. Absolutely. it is easier to drink, right? Because it is rounder mouthfeel. So, the acidity is it is high, okay? It is tingling, but it's not tart as the Chablis. So the rounder mouthfeel, it's, it's what the malolactic does, the aging in oak, the lees aging. So all of that, allows for some more rounder type of texture. Again, the fruits on the palate are the same, stone fruits. We have some guava, maybe as tropical fruits. But, there is this minerality into this wine as well, okay? So yeah, you can taste the whetstones on the palate too. So it is not a wine that, it is only defined by winemaking. You can see some more complexity into this as well, okay? Also, a good wine, I really like it. And I think it was a great example. So, okay, can you, and the Arboleda, the finish is also a little bit salty, right? And it is also mineral. But remember, that soil, there is no oyster shells in that soil. So they are achieving a very good style of wine because of the climate and because of the winemaking, okay? So please continue to put your opinions on the chat, especially about quality. I'll go back to the presentation because I want to share something with you and then, do our final conclusions in here, okay? All right, so, okay, so back to the technical sheet. So yes, one thing that is making the difference between these two wines, even though the region is cool, is the alcohol level. So if they did produce a dry wine at 12.5%, that means the grapes were ripe, but not very ripe, right? In the case of wine number 2, the Arboleda, now these grapes were riper. They had more sugar, and that sugar was converted into more alcohol because the wine is also dry. Does that make sense? So that means if you have riper grapes, grapes with more sugar, you have more flavor. And that is why we see the stone fruits in the Arboleda, okay? If we had a third wine in here, the Napa Chardonnay with 14% ABV, probably we would have a lot more flavor because of that, okay? So yes, so ripeness levels was the first thing that made this wine's different, okay? And of course, the fermentation in oak barrels and stainless steel, malolactic fermentation, the aging was very similar in both wines. Now, I'm pretty sure wine number 2, the Arboleda, had lees aging because those lees agents, the reductive winemaking, is well known for giving this gunflint aromas, okay? So this is not because of the soil, this is because of the winemaking. But yes, made for, a very good style of Chardonnay made in Chile as well. Now, going back to, and I have to assess the chat in here to see if there is more comments. So that means that, they are similar styles coming from same regions, climatic at least. But of course, the ripeness levels for the grapes were different, the fermentation was different, and therefore I will have a different wine, okay? Now, for wine number 1, this was a typical Chablis, very authentic as well, because you can, smell the green fruits, the citrus fruits. So, kind of taking you to a cool climate. And then, this winemaking, it is typical for Chablis. So overall, a wine that represents the terroir and represents the region, okay? So, and the Arboleda, of course, the winemaker in here is trying to mimic a style maybe between Chablis and New World Chardonnay. Maybe he's going more towards, you know, Burgundy Côte d'Or. But I think it is a well-made wine that has the complexity, and also it has this minerality, this gunflint powder that winemakers are trying to achieve. Now, and as final conclusions, you know, which wine represents more a terroir? And I should have put a poll in here. So you think Chablis represents better the terroir, or the Arboleda represents better the terroir? So yes, Ray, Karen, they are all saying Chablis. Nicole is saying Chablis. Yes, John, all of you are saying Chablis. Okay, so, you know, a lot of people saying Chablis. And, you know, Cheryl says Chablis, less oak influence to mask the soil influence. Yes, very good. But, you know, the winemaker for Arboleda, actually, if he used stainless steel tanks, and if you pick the grape, if he picks the grape a little bit in advance, he would have a very similar style of Chablis. Okay, maybe it is not, you know, winery's philosophy. Maybe it is not what their consumers would like, but you know, he could do it because of the region one in the climate. I absolutely agree with you. You know, the Chablis is a wine that represents the terroir. It's typical, it's authentic, it is all of this, but maybe because we know what to expect as well, right? I don't know about you, but you know, probably some of you have never tasted a Chardonnay from Colchagua before, so you don't know the style, you don't know what's typical. Whereas for Burgundy, we have been drinking Burgundy or hearing about it for so many years that yes, when people tell you high acid, austere, great for oysters, you know, mineral style, you smell the wine, you say, yeah, typical terroir is here, okay? Yes, so John is saying exactly like this. He's saying, in all fairness, we've all probably had more Chablis than a Chilean Chardonnay, so we have a very subjective palate. And I agree, John. I think it is all a little bit of that as well, okay? So, so yes, you know, this is not a winner or loser in the terroir series. It is, you know, in terroir matters. And in the case of this wines, I chose on purpose very different, similar climates, you know, with different things overall. But of course, you know, Chablis proved that yes, the terroir matters, because we were able to you know, describe a Chablis by the book, you know, the expected style and a very authentic style of Chablis. So let me know if you have any other questions, and we'll stop sharing my screen now. You know, I enjoyed both wines. I think they are great, represent the region really well. And if you do not have any other questions, you know, thank you so much for joining me for this webinar. And I'll see you guys then in 2 weeks when we are tasting and comparing 2 more wines. And I hopefully, you know, by the end of the series, we'll have a firm question if terroir matters or not, or if it is the hand of the winemaker or the climate only. So yes. All right, yeah, thank you all, guys. Thank you for joining me. Hope you enjoy the wines. Keep on tasting and enjoying them throughout the weekend, and I'll see you in 2 weeks then. All right, bye all. Bye-bye.